Hello, my friends. This is Heavy Arms Kai, back with another episode of Kerbal Space Program. Today, I actually have several things for you. First off, an attempt at a gravity habitat for our Kerbals. Secondly, will use a piece of technology we have floating around the moon, finally. And third, we are going to prepare a spacecraft for something interesting that is in orbit of Kerbin. So, with that, we will get right into the build of our gravity habitat. So as you know, I really enjoy the robotics parts mod. All the things you can do with all these motorized pieces is just so fantastic, and obviously I've said that before. But along with that, the Rototrons have both a controlled version and an uncontrolled version. And I thought to myself, if the uncontrolled version spins freely, I should be able to use that to make a rotating gravity type survival pod thing for the Kerbals by putting a hitchhiker's pod connected to the Rototrons. The only problem is, though, any of the mods that add like the centrifuge rings or anything like that, they put the ring in the middle of your craft, so you can only really build on one side of it, and you can't really build on the other because the other half is not stable or connected. So with this design, I thought, okay, I can have a rotating pod that looks like it's simulating gravity, but also have it stable with all four corners so that whatever I choose to build this into or attach this on, I won't have to worry about stability issues. So that's why I started to add these pillars on all four sides, because with the pillars and a few structural components, it'll make it to where, like I said, you can put this in line with something and it won't bend and flex on the craft, which is fantastic. So pretty much this one of the old ideas I've had floating around, and I finally decided to get to it. I wasn't sure how to start the rotation though, so I decided to add several engines onto this design later on and test those out to see how well they made it spin. I was afraid though that they may have too much thrust and they could just completely ruin the entire thing, but that's also why I scaled them down. And as you can see, there's not much space in between all of these structural struts and the actual hitchhiker's storage area. I was also afraid that those struts would break off the lights, but thankfully I was able to move them in a little bit more. And here I'm putting on all the engines, and I scaled them down to where they are basically micro, tiny, super itty bitty engines. And I will add some fuel, and then we will test this out on the launch pad to see how well it works. So give me a minute for that. Oh yes, and I also need some power because I was not sure if these Rototrons would require any power at all, even though they are uncontrolled and all that stuff. But alright, 1 second, and we will launch this sucker. And alright, let's go ahead and get things started. First things first, let's test the lights out. Yeah, that seems a little bright, but I mean, we should be okay. And get our engines into the right control group because we do not want to release this right yet. And right now I'm trying to see whether or not I can do anything with the controls just to make sure that these are the uncontrolled versions. And I can't right click or use the control menu, so that's good. And now we have a problem. I activated the engines, but nothing's happening. And I believe it's because the fuel tank is not connected to the hitchhiker storage item or component. So really quickly here, we'll go in and modify this design a little bit. I obviously knew what was going on and what was wrong, so it's not too big of a deal to add some fuel to the hitchhiker storage. It made it a little bit longer too, so I'll have to add another strut in here. Thankfully though, I can fix the distance in between these and make sure that we're still structurally good to go. I just have to attach a couple more of these struts here. And obviously I have a couple too many batteries. Like, I really don't even need these. I just left them on there for right now since we are just testing the design. And let's get ready to launch. So again, we will see if this actually works or not. And success. But unfortunately, there's a problem. As you can see, we're not picking up any speed. And I have no idea why. I mean, I've even got these engines maxed out, and this is as fast as we're really going. I was thinking maybe there's a right click menu, maybe there's a brake or something that I gotta turn off, but it's still just barely putzing along. And again, it's not picking up any speed. I did consider maybe making the engines a little bit bigger, but it really seems like that wouldn't make too much of a difference, because even when I shut it down, there is no movement whatsoever. So it could just be that these rotatrons are just made for complex, like, machinery that you would use the other robotics parts to move and all that stuff. Like, who knows, like complicated like servo legs or something like that. But yeah, this is not working the way I wanted it to, unfortunately. So for now, we're going to go ahead and scrap that idea, and I'm going to try something else. Again, we have had this ship in orbit forever, and I just have not used it at all. So it's way past due that I actually see if it's useful or not. I mean, I love the design, I love what I've done with it, but I have not used it at all. So we're going to undock one of these rescue craft and try getting it down to what is it? Hendius Kerman. I keep wanting to call him Heimdall. I believe the reason I was calling him that in the last episode is because I watched one of the Thor movies, and Heimdall is the black guy that guards the Rainbow Road, the really kick-ass guy that like got pwned way too easy by Loki. Anyways, enough crazy nerd talk about Thor. Let's get this thing to the ground. Don't you just love that design? I mean, that is pretty amazing. And you don't see too many people use the fuel tanks sideways like this. Alright, now we gotta activate the correct engines. So I'm going to use the rear engines to take us down. And luckily our orbit is lined up just perfect with Hendius Kerman to where we can easily get down to where we need to go. We don't have to time warp or anything. So activate engine 1 and engine 2. And we got plenty of fuel. So let's start our retrograde burn. I was pretty upset, or pretty, what's the word, apprehensive about these burns though, because I had never tested this design before, and was not sure about the fuel usage of the engines. I put a lot of smaller engines on this design just to make sure that the fuel efficiency was a little bit more economic, and it turns out to be pretty good. And there's also extra fuel down at the landing site as well that I could easily lock this thing down onto and basically suck up the fuel if I wanted to get Hendius back up into orbit. So we really could have probably saved him a lot sooner and gotten him off the moon, but it was more fun to be able to build like stuff to send him and try and send him food and all that stuff instead. So with that said, I'm going to skip through the landing really quick and just fast forward. That way we don't have to watch all of it, because again, we've done all this before. All right then. We are getting pretty close, and at this point, I decided we are going to activate our VTOL engines. And I was getting pretty close and picking up speed, so I really had to be quick with this. I did not want to crash this beautiful creation into the ground. And we got to get all six of them. I'm burning before I even have them all ready, just to try and slow myself down enough. And these things are half the size, so they only have half the thrust of the normal engines. You can see I'm coming in pretty fast here. I was a little worried, and I could tell that the front or the top two engines, we we really didn't have much fuel in them, and it's because I never really wired these things up for that. But luckily, again, since these engines are half the size, they use half the fuel. So again, that's awesome. And you can see under the undercarriage, I have the skid type landing gear things, and these things are great because, as the name implies, they skid you in on the ground, which it basically works like landing gear. The only difference is these things, your forward momentum isn't as much to worry about, and they work much better in low gravity environments than landing gear because they don't have the same bounce. As but another downside is there are no brakes on them, so you really have to be able to do a or what is it, a prograde or retrograde? Yes, you have to do a retrograde burn with your craft in order to slow yourself all the way down. Then you have to retract the landing gear, otherwise you start skidding forward. But surprisingly enough, this VTOL configuration worked fantastic on the moon. Like I was able to glide this spacecraft in no problem to the landing site, and the way the engines are giving me thrust and the way the controls work in Kerbal Space Program when you're flying, I mean, this thing flew fantastically, especially coming in on the moon. So I'm very proud of this design. It works really well. But again, just coming in for a maneuver. Uh, Hopefully, Hendius Kerman appreciates this marvelous gift. And every time I started losing forward momentum, all I had to do was pitch down the nose a little bit, and I was good to go. And the particle effects when I get close to the ground on the moon are pretty awesome too. Kicking up all that regolith, which is fancy space talk for moon dust. But yeah, that's just awesome looking. And then I've got the undercarriage lights showing the ship's space or what is it, shadow profile on the moon as well. That's amazing looking. I can't say as much how proud I am of this design. I really, really should have utilized this sooner. But yeah, like with all this burn though, I was getting a little bit worried that maybe I was wasting way too much fuel. And I did come in for a landing here. And notice how I'm still skidding forward pretty good at a pretty decent pace. That's because, like I said, these landing gear, they almost act as ice skates. To where I really didn't have to waste any more fuel. I probably could have skidded all the way into, yeah, and here I have to turn on the RCS because I am coming in at quite a decent amount of speed, and I didn't want to crash into the small moon base, I should say, because it's not really the Hotel Ritz, but it is better than what he had. And it's got a space toilet in it, so again, much better. And I've pretty much killed all the forward acceleration, but yeah, that's pretty much it. And I still have more than enough fuel to get back into orbit, no problem. And as soon as I drop or retract the landing gear, I have no means of sliding forward whatsoever. So, all in all, pretty good design. And I still have plenty of fuel in all of our tanks. I think I have some small ones here. Yeah. I'll have to do a little bit of rebalancing. But all in all, it's a really good design. So let's go to our third and final thing, since you probably don't want to see me transferring all this fuel. Okay, so we have had something interesting in orbit of our planet here, and it is an asteroid that the gravity has managed to capture. And I've never managed to actually do an asteroid capture mission, but I think it's way past due since I'm far better at making orbits and docking with space stations and all that good stuff. So I believe I should be pretty successful with this. But we need a craft that can actually grab the actual asteroid and bring it into orbit so that we can study it and check it out and maybe build some cool stuff with our small little asteroid here. So we're going to build an asteroid capture unit. So in order to capture an asteroid, we're going to need to use the grappler unit. And again, this is something that I've never managed to do, but I really think it'd be fun to finally be able to take and get one of these asteroids into a decent Kerbin orbit. So I'm going to put plenty of fuel on it, plenty of RCS, more than enough batteries to run all the robotics control, and pretty much covering all my bases, giving it solar panels and all that good stuff. Basically wiring up the fuel, putting struts on here to make it strong enough to survive impact with the actual asteroid itself, and all in all, just like everything you would think you would need for a rendezvous mission with a non-Kerbal controlled craft. I also thought to myself, after wiring up all these fuel tanks, that I should probably do a prograde and retrograde rocket setup so that the rendezvous will basically be easier. That way I can turn on the forward-facing engines and then turn them off and turn on the rear-facing engines and so on and so forth, and it'll make the rendezvous a lot easier. I also put on plenty of RCS so I can do all the micro movements and all that good stuff. I've got more than enough RCS fuel, and I'm going to have more than enough SAS whenever I finally basically meet up with the asteroid. So I should have more than enough torque to be able to turn the asteroid as well. I think this is an A class asteroid, which is the smallest one. So I really shouldn't have too many problems like moving it and turning it because it's not as massive as one would expect an asteroid to be. It shouldn't be much larger than our craft, but we'll find out once we actually manage to rendezvous. Alright, and with that said, I believe we are going to end the episode here. All I'm really doing right now is just making the launch package, which we've all seen many, many times before. I always go way too much fuel and just load it down to make sure that I can get the mission done. So, next episode, we will start off trying to rendezvous with this asteroid and see whether we win or lose or what's going on. But till then, I hope you've enjoyed the episode. Please leave a like if you have. Again, any suggestions you may have for future episodes, just let me know. And I do realize that he is not Heimdall, he's Hendius, so I will not get that wrong in the next episode. But till then, take it easy, guys, and thank you for watching.